Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a great amendment. Please vote yes. What I like about it is the voluntary nature of its effect on the policy, the underlying policy, gets back to some of the original spirit of the Urban Growth Management Act. As you recall, Madam Speaker, in its early days, in the early window, joining the GMA was optional for counties. They could voluntarily join. And of the 6 counties that make up my district, the 19th, a couple of them joined and now regret doing that, and frankly are looking for ways to get out of the GMA. And so what this amendment does is it restores some of that voluntary mechanism to the underlying policy, which frankly isn't great, but it allows smaller districts, smaller counties, to voluntarily accept the terms of the underlying policy. So in spirit, it reflects some of the early going of the GMA, and it will give some of my counties who now regret having anything to do with the GMA the chance to rectify at least part of the mistakes they made decades ago. Madam Speaker, it is essential that we allow local county governments to set the terms of permitting and development in their jurisdictions along the lines that work for them. It is essential to the spirit of growth in order to have growth to manage. And I think that this amendment really hammers the point and implements the policy that rural counties and smaller counties need to be able to make their decisions about what's best for their development. Please vote yes. Let's speak plainly about the climate and environmental hazards posed by homeless encampments. It is not only that raw sewage is dumped into the ground and the water. Many homeless encampments are chop shops. They are taking apart bicycles. They are taking apart motorized vehicles, dumping motor oil, transmission fluid in an unregulated, Wild West kind of way. And this unregulated Wild West kind of way applies to a lot of the behaviors in these encampments. Some of the residents cook methamphetamine, and that is a toxic chemical process that results in waste dumped into the ground and erratically all over the place in these locations. Madam Speaker, it's important that we not blind ourselves to the reality, the ugly reality of what a lot of these homeless encampments are. If you speak to local law enforcement, they'll speak plainly about it. If you speak to many local health departments, they'll speak plainly about it. These are toxic sites, Madam Speaker. And to purport to a public policy that is attempting to remedy environmental impacts and climate impacts from growth management plans and planning in general, and ignore that homelessness is not merely a few people in a tent, but many of these encampments are Mad Max and Thunderdome urban developments, unregulated, lawless, and certainly a toxic negative impact on the local environment. Madam Speaker, this amendment acknowledges an inconvenient truth about homeless camps, that they are a toxic effect on the climate. It's a necessary realization of a hard truth, Madam Speaker. Please vote yes on this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is another really important amendment, and I think it does improve the underlying policy, which needs improvement. One of the most important things that this amendment does, Madam Speaker, is it removes some of the most divisive language and the most divisive concepts in the underlying policy. Madam Speaker, there is nothing more divisive in this state than this notion that vehicle miles traveled need to be reduced by edict or policy or law. Madam Speaker, in my part of the state, they're practically fighting words. The people in Southwest Washington believe that these efforts to get rid of vehicle miles traveled is a cultural divide and an attack on their way of lives. When you live in the rural part of the state, driving a lot is simply part of life. It always has been. Before you were driving, you were riding a horse, usually. But this is part of life where I live. And this press to get rid of vehicle movement, and to fight sprawl, it's like speaking a foreign language. And in the underlying policy, this vehicle mile traveled focus, it really almost becomes Alice in Wonderland when you compare it to the immediate problems, pollution problems, environmental impact problems, ultimately climate impact problems, of issues like the homeless camps we've talked about, of issues like pulling clean energy producing dams from the state's rivers. I mean, these are the climate threats. Driving your F-150 from Elma into West Olympia, that's not the climate threat. And so what this amendment does that is so important, in the hope that the underlying policy would represent one Washington, is it gets rid of this divisive language, Madam Speaker, that I'm concerned some people don't even recognize as divisive. So vote yes on the amendment, and let's bring the different parts of the state together in policy.